For example, when it comes to the example of taking turns or sharing, this is a social skill level of things. What you can do at home is you can simulate opportunities for your child to take turns with you, to share with you. And what your job is to do is to basically simulate what it would be like to, like, so for example, what I do a lot of times, because kids are they value their toys. There's certain things that they like. There's certain things that they honestly don't even want anybody else to touch. And whenever I find that thing out, whatever it is, a dinosaur, a book, a dolly, whatever it is, at some point I will ask them, is it okay if I play with that too? And knowing that most often the first response is no. And it's almost even in a mean way. They're like, no. And then, so that gives me the opportunity to then exaggerate what it would feel, what the feeling that comes with their denial of just giving me the opportunity to touch their toy or use it for a second, right? So I'll be like, oh, really? Why? How come I can't? What do you mean? And then I do that, and then I make sure that I put a little bit of abstract comedy in there. I'll be like, well, so what's going on? If I hold the baby or if I hold the toy, is it just gonna break all of a sudden or what? Like, what's gonna happen? Sometimes just even creating some type of a random, realistic possibility that is outlandish helps them to come to terms with the fact that, is this really that big of a deal? And a lot of times that's honestly, that's my tip, and that's where you can take it and put it into your personality. But the one thing I would suggest is that you utilize, however you want to, some type of a funny tone, some type of a fun loving tone, and then make ludicrous examples that are realistic but that aren't actually realistic. Let me just make that more clear. Another example, if, for example, like, I have a client right now that loves dinosaurs. If he's playing with a certain dinosaur, I can tell that he doesn't really, I'll be like, okay, so this is how I segue into it. I'll be like, okay, so we're going to play with dinosaurs. Which ones are we going to play with? And then he will pull them out. And then I'll be like, okay, so which one do I get to play with? And then it's like, the first time we ever did this, he was like, and then he went to a different area and grabbed it. So all the ones he put out, I could tell were his favorite. He did not even want me to touch one of them. So he went somewhere else to grab another toy for me to be able to play with. And then at that moment, anytime that they give you something to use that you know they've thought about and they've given it to you, then I exaggerate that feeling of happiness. Like, oh, what? Awesome. Thank you so much. You're going to let me use your toy? I mean, why was he all the way over there anyway? But what about these ones? Are you sure? And then I might reach out, and if they're like, no, that is an opportunity for me to practice throughout the day, or even throughout those minutes, to get to a point where you can wrap their mind around, you let them have the feeling that they want. For some reason, they just don't want to give it up. And then you're like, okay, fine, I'll just play with this one. You might even switch tasks so that it's like, okay, well, if you're not going to share, then I'm just going to go over here and play this. What I'm doing is allowing them to feel the emotions, to feel them. That we can't, sometimes I can't, if I tell them an emotion, it's not necessarily going to stick. I put them into scenarios and situations and simulations is what I call them throughout time. And you can do this every day in your life. You're with your child every single day. I only have children for a certain, like 2 or 3 hours at a time. And I can develop a amazing bond because we do this the whole time. I'm using these skills or these little techniques that I'm literally modeling right now for you to create the feeling. At some point, I want to create the feeling in them of empathy. They will eventually empathize because it's natural. So if you can tap into the natural instinct of whatever it is that you want to accomplish, then the child will not only do it that time, but it ends up staying as a seed that's planted in them that then you get to water over and over and over again, and it creates a bond with you and that child because you just keep reiterating. And when you give more attention to their positive choice, or the choice that we all know you want, which we want them to take turns, we want them to share, whenever they do that thing on their own, they make that decision after you've done certain things or said it or repeated it, because sometimes it might take 2 or 3 times. It might not even happen that day that I can play with that toy. But if I can get them to give me any of their toys, I do that exaggerated. Thank you so much. Oh my goodness, this toy I can play. Are you sure? Are you sure? Thank you. And then you'd be surprised that they might then, it's like I see it in their eyes, like that little, it's so cute because they'll lower their eyebrows like they're thinking, and then they lift their eyebrows, and I have little boys grab their favorite toy and then go, you could play with this one. And I'm like, oh, really? Oh wow, thanks. And then right when they hand it to me, I just give it back. Because their anxiety for doing what they just did, I don't want them to feel what we would call in sales buyer's remorse. I do not want them to feel remorseful after they do that, after that instinct of being empathetic and like wanting to share comes to them, so that they do it, but then they look and they see me holding their favorite toy, and then instantly they're like, I shouldn't have done that. Oh my gosh, I can't believe it. We don't even want them to get there. So sometimes, right, if they're really grabbing onto something that they really don't want to share, I will give it right back to them. And then that feeling, they go, oh. And so that's a practice. And then I make that timing longer and longer and longer and longer, so that they get practice feeling that feeling of, oh yeah, I want to be empathy. She wants to play with my toy. I feel empathy. I want to go ahead and then feel compassionate. So you go from empathy to compassion, and then they do the thing. They do whatever it is that they wouldn't have done. Technically, as I simulate that going back and forth with them, parents, you can do this yourself with anything. You can, and the best way to model it is by sharing something that you really value. Usually the things in our house that we're like, don't touch that, nope, hey, that, don't break, no honey, you can't even touch it. And then you watch them go, I remember being a kid feeling that way, like, oh,